They are going to remain and they are going to stay as a golden standard for the drug approval. I don't know if Natasha has something to add. But definitely, maybe the design will change. Perhaps we're going to see more changes in the preclinical screenings. And about the big data, how it will impact the drug treatments and when it will happen, well, it all depends on the big players. It depends on the analysis that we are able to provide. It also depends how much we are open for the new things. So I'm sure that you are going to see, definitely. So.
Just came to my attention when we're talking about, for instance, how the clinical trials are influenced. Clinical trials don't look anymore like there's a placebo versus your drug that you're investigating. So this is old-fashioned clinical trials that are out of date now. When I say now, I mean in the last 5 to 10 years maybe. So at the moment, the clinical trials, when they're set up, they need to be set up in that way that they're above the standard medical care. Otherwise, no ethics committee or regulatory body is going to approve it. So that's why some of the clinical trials cannot be run, for instance, in the States or in Japan, because you cannot offer the lower care than already in that country. And the design of the clinical trials is changing, meaning the clinical trials already have the adaptive design that is different from the classical one, meaning if the patient is passing the screening period to see if he or she is eligible, they're entering the open label phase usually, so we have to see if this is a suitable drug for the patient. And only then the patient is entering the double blind, and usually the double blind is out of placebo. And usually now the clinical trials look like that we have investigational products and not only one standard treatment to be compared with, but 2 or 3 of them. And usually now the trial design looks like that we have so much changing in between during the course of the trial. So as Katarina mentioned, for instance, we're not fixing dose in the clinical trials anymore, like 34 milligrams, so that's it, that's what you get. But this is changing throughout, and it's very adaptive, just because of everybody wants to target the individual patient's need. And if you go to clinicaltrial.gov, there you can see all the clinical trials run at this moment in the whole world. You can see that one client is running for one particular disease or the subtype of disease, not one trial, but just because of the data and everything, they're running roughly 30 trials in the same time in order to gain as much as data and in order to target the individual patient. So my kind of a conclusion from my modest experience would be that the both things will be used very much. The PK/PD modeling, various other designs to approach the safety of the patient and to analyze it, along with the clinical trials. I mean, if it helps, the answer.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
I can see, like, from this technology that these PK/PD models and genomics in this 21st century is a real opportunity to give another chance to orphan drugs. So I know companies aren't interested in orphan drugs, which is why they're orphan drugs. So my question to you guys is, how do we uncover the information we need from orphan drugs to look if there's any more suitable candidates in the future, and how would we as pharmacists grasp that data that you're talking about to actually implement a potential solution?
So the question is, how do you get a data for the orphan drugs?
Yeah, so it's 2 bits. So A, how do you get the data from the orphan drugs? Because I know it's company data, but there are companies out there that do this sort of thing. And then B, how we're talking about with this sort of PK/PD modelling stuff, would it be a university that you approach, or is there consultants? How would you go about actually doing this in reality? Because as a pharmacist, I think we're probably one of the only people who are actually going to look at orphan drugs because the companies aren't interested in them. So how would we as pharmacists take this forward using this technology with orphan drugs?
So what is the role of the pharmacists into the orphan drugs and finding the...
Yes, I mean, I've been to Malaysia and I've seen pharmacists out there who have taken drugs off the market and they try and find new therapeutic uses for them. So I'm wondering, as a pharmacist, and if anyone else in this room is interested in taking those orphan drugs, how would you recommend that we proceed? Because you guys are the experts in the trials and know a lot more than I do about the area.
Oh gosh, I think you had 10 questions in one. Well, let me go if I target the answer. So for the orphan drug, it's the biggest challenge because you have so limited data because it's orphan. So usually the background information would be that the pharmaceutical companies are gathering the data approximately between 2 and 4 years before they even start a clinical trial. And that goes along with the research of the geography, where potentially those patients would be, also the analysis of the demography, so all the data that could be available from the, reading the literature, then approaching the, key opinion leaders in each and every country, and then I think the bottom line would be that all the very, very powerful, meaning very big companies who have a very good investors behind them can run a clinical trial on orphan drugs, because I know the couple of them that we had is that we are targeting to enroll, for instance, I don't know, like 40 patients, and we are hunting those patients all over the world. So one hospital can get like one patient, and it took them 2 years to find this patient to meet all eligibility and exclusion criteria. But I would say that from the from the point of the pharmacist working in a hospital, I would say that it's a mutual effort from the whole site staff to involve pharmacists more and to bring them out of the basement and out of the accountability of the IP of the drugs, but to bring them to the medical charts, to bring them to the visits when they're visiting the patients. Yeah, to work lively with the patients, to be on the sessions and the meetings with the doctors, so someone who can go through the medical charts and actually maybe see something that was missed. As Katarina mentioned, a lot of countries that are still developing don't have e-cards, so they don't have e-medical charts. So it's a very time-consuming to go through all the medical charts and potentially find a suitable patient. So if the answer would be, I would say that everybody needs to get involved and everybody needs to get educated properly about that one. And not a single person should be missed, not even a nurse, not even a pharmacist, and of course not only doctors should be included in this search, because most probably, so don't get me wrong here, the nurse will be the one who can see some of the twigs and tweens in the patient. The pharmacist is the one who is reviewing, the background information and seeing how the patient is suitable or vulnerable, or what the drug he or she cannot take and why cannot take. So I would say the mutual team needs to go there. And if you're gonna get working in a hospital pharmacy, I would say just be charming and persistent of being included in other things and explore. Very easy task. So I think I can give to others if there's.
Yeah, it's just as Daksha said. So probably there will be global initiatives for orphan drugs. So we are already having some of them. Correct me if I'm wrong, but this is a way to target and to find orphan drugs.
If I may add that WHO collects data related to orphan drugs, and if you really want to be informed about any special orphan drug, you can go to special WHO center related to special orphan preparation and to be informed about it enough.
Okay, thank you very much. Yep.
My question is about pre-approval access to medicines. Actually, what is the process of getting access to medicines for in pre-approval clinical trials? Who decides whether a patient is appropriate? And because you said an example with mother of a child who's on Facebook campaign, what is actually the process? How can a patient benefit from such medicine?
I think I mentioned that we must revise very precisely who can be involved into pre-approval access. In that example, when one boy suffered from adenoviral infection, I told that parents wanted to engage his son into a pivotal trial, but it was their request was refused because of lack of data about efficiency of a new preparation called brincidofovir. But finally, for example, sometimes social media campaign can make final decision whether or not children can be involved into trials, which is wrong. We think that it's wrong way. But I mentioned that this program about pre-approval access should be made on recommendation of European Medicines Agency, which very precisely tells that before pre-approval access, we must consider including all potential patients for pre-approval to be involved first into clinical trials. Only if it is not possible, then only that we can make decision whether or not some patient can be involved into one program of pre-approval access. Even in this situation, ethics committee may give approval for including all the patient in pre-approval access programs. Okay. That's something similar speaking about conventional trials. When we consider for conventional trials which patient must be involved, we must have approval from the ethics committee, approval from regulatory agencies. What is the difference when we compare conventional clinical trials and pre-approval trials? We don't have enough time in case of pre-approval trials. We must give appropriately drug, for example, in case of Ebola viral infection. We cannot wait for approval from regulatory agency. We must give drug when drug is needed. After a time, there is no purpose to consider giving of the drug. Okay.
Thank you. Yeah. We know that the clinical trials are a very long process. I would like to know for you what's the best way to have better clinical trials without crossing the limit of ethics. For you, what's the best way to respect ethics and improve the clinical trials?
I think you need to repeat the question, because I know what you're targeting, but I don't know if I understand. So what is the borderline between running a clinical trial and doing ethics? I presume that you guys had at the faculty the lectures on the ethics and like generally developing. Yeah, good. So it is true that throughout the history, the clinical trials itself they were developing, and it was discussed, and we did see the faults that we made and maybe the gray areas of how the clinical trials are run. So therefore, roughly in the last, I would say, 15 to 20 years, it's been beginning to be more and more rigid. So there is no creativity, as I said, in the clinical trials, because there's so many approvals that everybody needs to gain. And I know this in this moment when you say approvals, it's so theoretical. But there's different layers of approvals that need to be done. For instance, if a client is making a protocol, this protocol is not just homework that somebody made and it's given to the ethics. This goes to the very, very rigid reviews from the client, from the CRO, from independent reviewers, meaning the top experts are being consulted if this is something that is ethic, and if it's manageable, meaning if it's not too demanding for the patient and for the caregiver, for instance. And after all these approvals and reviews, this is why sometimes there's like a year of a protocol review, just for the protocol to be reviewed. Then usually, off note, the client goes to the FDA, to EMEA, to other regulatory agencies that are more strict, and go for the consultation and ask them, okay, we have posed this protocol, would this be approved by you? And then you have the FDA and EMEA experts coming back to the client saying, this one passed, you shall not pass with this. And they have to go back and revise it, even sometimes so many times before this is called protocol final. But then this is the beginning of the road. Then this protocol needs to be given to the doctors, top doctors that we want to work with, and they as well review the protocol and say you shall not pass. In my hospital this will not pass for this and these reasons. We need to adapt it So that's why in so many instances we have a country-specific protocol to suit, for instance, regulations in that particular country. And then we approach the hospital ethics, and they also review it in very detail. Then we approach the regulatory agency after that, and only that, and with that, we approach the clinical trial. So you can get, I would say, from the first point until you begin with the trial, it can pass even 3 to 4 years. So I would say that's the line of the ethics. But throughout the trial, we are all humans, and the hospital staff are humans as well. So they can make mistakes and not follow the protocol. So I guess that's the other thing that you wanted to target with your question, is that we have a very strict regulations, and our monitors are trained to catch single protocol deviation. So even if the patient needed to be weighted once at the beginning of the visit, and they done it at the end of the visit, that's a protocol deviation, because the protocol, for a reason, say, was something needs to be done in that particular way in this particular hour. And if we see that there are recurring protocol deviations with one investigator who is, for some reason, hopefully not on purpose, but being sloppy and not following the protocol, we ought to have the retraining with them. We need to see if this is going to be continued, and it is, this principal investigator is shut out from the clinical trials. And as well, we have our, we call it the blacklist of the principal investigators who are not compliant, who are not doing the good clinical trials, as well as the FDA has it. So all of it is very public, very transparent, and if you know how to, I say if you know how to Google it, but there are like official websites where you can see how people are doing clinical trials, you can exactly know who not to approach. So each and every aspect is very much regulated, it doesn't give any creativity. I'm not saying that errors are not happening, but I would say there are like so many layers of protection for the patient safety in order to gain the safety and integrity of the patients and their privacy. This is beginning more and more important, especially after the 25th of May this year. I presume you all have got so many emails coming from so many different companies asking you if they can use your data, like, I don't know, from the Facebook, Twitter, and even some website that you didn't know that you are hooked up on. So this is because there's this GDPR going alive. This is General Data Protection Regulatory, which is going to protect patients, and the citizens should be protected even more.
Thank you. Next question.
Hello, Tilan from Slovenia. Thank you for your presentations. My question is about the drugs for compassionate use. So, if I understood correctly, it's always done case-to-case basis, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So, how is that not time-consuming for the committees to deal with every single request they get? And also another question, if you have maybe information about how many requests do they get each year in Europe, and how many of those are actually approved? So how big is this system? Because it cannot also get too popular, because it's also not regulated so much. Yeah. Thanks.
So thanks for your question. It's very difficult to answer because we don't know about characteristic of disease in which we met. So there can be a problem to know how many patients will be involved into these compassionate use or any other pre-approval access programs. It depends on the situation. In case of, for example, if people really suffer from diseases which cannot be treated by adequate therapy options, we must consider their involved first into clinical trials. Then, if it is possible, if we get approval from regulatory agencies or from ethics committee, we can think about some kind of pre-approval access, like compassionate use or named patient programs, etc. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Please introduce yourselves before the question. No, that's the mic.
Thank you, Reese from the UK. With only 12 years until the Sustainable Development Goals from the UN are meant to be achieved, how can pharmaceutical industry make sure that the new technology is sustainable and available to everyone all over the world, and that less developed countries don't miss out on the technology that we have in more developed countries?
Could you repeat the question, please?
Yeah, okay, sorry. We have heard today about the new technology that is used in clinical trials, but this may be difficult to implement in countries that are less technologically advanced. So how can industry play a role in making this technology available to everyone, and so that nobody in poorer countries doesn't get the benefit of the new technology?
So are you aiming about new technology or new drugs, or both?
Yeah, in any way, just so that by 2030 the UN plan to eradicate poverty can be achieved.
Well, that's a good one, because it's an enormous challenge. And I would say the biggest challenge for pharmaceutical companies to enter not that developed, like regulatory stable or like politically stable countries is a challenge, because in order to get all the approvals, we need a country that functions. So it's a kind of it's a circle that we need to break somehow, because this is the issue we have in Africa and some of the countries in Asia, even with the South America. Like everything functions there, of course, supposedly stable countries, but we're facing so many operational issues, so many technical issues to even get there and to get some of the approvals. So I would say, from my experience, it needs to be a broader initiative, and it's usually combined, because from the aspect of the clinical trial, this can go through because it's going to be beneficial for the patients. And what usually the companies are offering is the extension of the study. So after the trial is ended in a year, and we see that patients doing fantastic on it, then there is this ethical question like, okay, now we got hooked up on a good drug or a good medical device, but what afterwards? Is he going back to his old obsolete medication? And what the pharmaceutical companies are offering is an extension study, and usually lasts like a year or two, depending from the disease. And if there is like end-term cancer, they're offering the treatment until they die. So there was a question about compassionate use, so this is also being used, and the clinical clients are also offering not this drug, unused drug during the clinical trials, to be back originally where it's from and to be destroyed, but to be left there to be used in the controlled way, meaning not to be given to everybody but who it needs. But this is immense costs and efforts to be done, and I've seen that the trials being done in Africa and the low developed Asia, it's only done by very, very big companies who can afford that, so who have the efforts to beat these local issues there. And it is a challenge. It is still a challenge. That's why if you go and see where the clinical trials are run, usually you're going to see Europe, you're going to see Southeast Asia, of course US is dominant because the regulatory goes very fast and it's all regulated, and South American Asia being left out too many times, except for South African Republic. So yeah, I think definitely it's going to be something to be changed, because we also need specialized individual drugs for the other races, for the other types of diseases and other types of population. So it's going to come, but I think it's going to be a big battle there.
So, as Natasha said, about the things going on during the clinical trials, but also afterwards, when the drug is approved, for example, in the States and not in some non-developed countries in Europe, the hospitals can apply for special programs, and the companies can sponsor a certain amount, let's say, of drug treatments for their patients. So, for example, if you have, let's say, I don't know, cancer patients, and we don't have any treatments for them because the drugs are not registered in Serbia, we can apply for a program to some companies, and they can help us by bringing their drugs to our market. So it's not only during the drug development and clinical trials, it's also afterwards when the drugs are registered, but not in some countries.
Can I add something? I would like to add that if you want from one clinical trial to be reliable, it must be multi-center. only first phase of clinical trial is based for the country in which pharmaceutical company is from. So when we really want from clinical trial to be good, it should share any other countries which must involve underdevelopment countries, and that's why when we speak about pre-registration phases of drug development, it means that into this process are involved countries which are not all good developed. They involve underdevelopment countries also. So there is no difference between data from second and third phase of clinical trials compared to the first phase, which data we took only from the country from which pharmaceutical company is.
Thank you. Next question. Yep.
Hello, Jirka from PSA. I have a question about the big data. Well, the healthcare systems of different countries contain enormous amount of data, but these data are not shared with the manufacturers of medicine. But they would really like to get to these data. So what would you propose to how to solve this?
At the moment, unsolvable. Well, it's not only about the data, it's also how are you going to use this data. So as I mentioned at the beginning of my lecture, some data can be used in order to target us as the potential customers for their products, right? So the companies are decreasing the cost for the marketing. And this is something good in the perspective of the companies. But on the other hand, the data can be used in some negative terms. So there is a big debate about sharing the data between countries and between, let's say, different healthcare systems, between companies, between government and the companies. So, for example, if you're a patient and you're not adherent to the advices that are given to you by your MD, so maybe the health system will say, you know what, I don't want to pay your health insurance, but you're not adherent, you're smoking, and you're not supposed to smoke. So, it's a bit sensitive area, and I don't know, I think that we are going to see what will happen with this thing, but at the moment we don't have any clear directions how data sharing is going to be.
Thank you. Next question.
So, Laura from the Netherlands, thank you for your very interesting presentations. I enjoyed them a lot. We have heard a lot about clinical trials and the classical phases that they're in. I guess we all thought that in university as well. But it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of money, and sometimes it fails. Are you familiar with question-based drug discovery? And what would your opinion be on that? Yeah, okay, so question-based drug discovery is a relatively new aspect of drug discovery that does not go in traditional phases, like phase 1, phase 2, A to B, but looks at the most important questions that need to be answered first, which often leads to shorter and more simultaneous tests at the same time, which just shortens the whole process.
Terribly slow today, like seriously slow. So your question would be, what is happening if you need to get something fast, or?
No, well, my first question would be if you're familiar with question-based drug design, which is a kind of
evidence-based drug.
No, question-based drug design.
Question-based drug.
Yeah. So that's like a relatively new way of discovering drugs, looking at which questions are most important to answer first. Because now in first phase we only look at safety and then we go to efficacy and blah blah blah. But in some kinds of drugs, like if you have a drug for a certain disease and you want to make something similar, you don't need to do all the tests again because you know like the active compound will what it will probably do. So, but I'm guessing that you're not that familiar with costimers.
Yeah, the one exists, and it's used more often, but it's used also when there's a generic drug to come to the market, especially when somebody mentioned, what if you have a poor country that cannot afford a very expensive drug, then the local pharmaceutical companies get engaged and they do the generic drug when the patent is off. And just because it's the same, or let's say the similar, they can pass some of the phases. And I think that more and more everybody's questioning this approach, because how similar is enough, how similar is safe and effective. So they are skipping now a couple of the phases of the trial. However, they ought to, but I say they ought to, still it's not a must, they ought to provide that the safety is not being jeopardized to the patients. Still, I think the global approach is that the safety is not the minimum. It has to be accompanied with the efficiency and effectiveness of the drug. So this has been changing for quite a while, and since the 25th of May, when this GDPR becoming live, this is going to be even more rigid. And I think, although it's kind of new, it's very powerful because a lot of companies can profit from it because they're similar enough. But I think it's going to, unfortunately, that we're going to have to wait between 5 and 10 years to actually see that it's similar, it's not the same, and the effects of the drug are not the same if you're using a generic drug or you're using an innovative, for instance, drug. Or, in some cases, in some instances, they're really safe enough, efficient enough, but skipping parts of a trial can make a difference. So I think there's something to be seen, and in the couple of last years, we have those new drugs being approved so quite fast. But like with the other drug in the pharmacology, just wait for the rare adverse events in 5 to 10 years from now, and then we're going to see if that answers the question. Yes.
Thank you. Next question.
Hi everyone, Kevin from Belgium. Really enjoyed the presentation, thank you. I was wondering, because we're seeing so much adaptive designs, accelerated approval. In the US, the FDA's opinion is also accepted by the payers, but in Europe we see that if EMA gives the marketing authorization, payers are not always willing to accept the same evidence from the clinical trials to actually reimburse the medications. Do you have any opinions on how we can tackle this challenge?
So the question is, what about the patient reimbursement in the EU if the drug is approved by FDA?
So that if like EMA is very open to innovative ways and adaptive clinical trial designs, and also accelerated approvals, but then afterwards, when it comes to the HTA bodies, they're often not willing to reimburse because they don't think the evidence was sufficient. So I was wondering if you have any opinions on how we can tackle that challenge in Europe.
Oh, there you go. This is the agency who is developing still. It's still it's still a baby with these baby diseases going on there. And since we have so many countries involved in the European Union, and officially they should work under this same cloud and this same umbrella, still they're like national ones who can say, no, I don't accept it, or I do accept it. And this is I would say, the big gray area that agencies need to work on. And from the local perspective, when I was working as a CRA in Serbia, I was really kind of ignorant and very unhappy with the way, for instance, how our agency was always functioning, because I was always asking, why do you need these extra approvals when EMEA approved it, FDA approved it, come on, can you go faster? And they were like, no. And now, the more I'm getting older, I do understand why, for instance, some things are better when they're slower, and they need to be determined if this is really okay. This is a complete gray area, and I would say if there is a patient association behind, a very powerful patient association, they can go through the reimbursement and they can do stuff, but it needs to be a very good patient association with a pharmaceutical company behind it to push this through, especially because EMEA goes hand in hand with the FDA on some levels. So this is, I would say, the big technical, economic, political thing that is ongoing at the moment. And patient associations are getting more and more strong to deal with that because the governments don't have the power to do that, unfortunately. They should be having the power to do that like this and change the rules in the hospitals, but it's the patient associations with the pharmaceutical companies who can make a difference. Unfortunately, this is what I see at the moment. The governments, national governments are being too slow in accepting the change and being liberated to also do this reimbursement, unfortunately.
Thank you. Next question. Okay. Actually, I have one. There was mentioned in one of the presentations that there was a family and the boy couldn't get the medicine, and they went on a campaign, like a public campaign, for him to get the medicine. And that takes me to a patient's group. We were talking about that now, and sometimes they can have some pressure on clinical trials and development of clinical trials, and where are we going with the development of some new drugs. So my question is, how game-changing can be empowering patients group for clinical trials?
Very, because it's a circle. The pharmaceutical companies, in order to get data, they need patients. In order to get patients need to be found. In order for patients to fit, they need to fit. And if they want to fit there, they need to be comfortable with everything. So at the end of the line, it's the patient. So they need to customize it for the patients who are for that particular, for instance, disease. And if there's a vulnerable patient, for instance, who needs a caregiver, you need to adapt the visits the way that both the patient and the caregiver can come. For instance, your patients can be 80 years old, so you cannot harass them with, I don't know, being in a hospital for 6 hours. They cannot last that long because, or they have, for instance, as I mentioned, psychosis. So that patient is on the ceiling after an hour and a half, so he cannot bear that. Or there's an Alzheimer patient. So don't you ask Alzheimer patient if he can name you 10 countries. He cannot, and this needs to be adapted. Or there is a pediatric patient, so this needs to be adapted as well. The patients cannot read, or they can limit it read. So it goes. Usually the industry is going very fast. They think they know how the things are run, but they need to consult the local CROs, the local patient associations, because they know this protocol shall not pass, because these patients cannot make it. They cannot understand what you're asking them from. So they're not going to be compliant, and they're not going to take the drug. They're not going to come to your visit. So your study goes down, and you wasted billions of dollars for nothing. So I think it's going to bottom lines like that the very good organized pharmaceutical company is going to reach to the bottom level, asking patient association, asking local doctors, asking so many different layers of people of influence if this makes sense, not just on paper but in reality. It should be like that. Yeah.
Thank you very much. So if there are no more questions, I would like to thank you all for being here. I know yesterday was a rough night, so thank you for being here. And with this panel discussion, I close the symposium for the 15th EPSA Autumn Assembly.